Hey everyone, Mark Marshall with ProAudiofiles.com and GuitaristMarkMarshall.com. In this production breakdown, I'm going to talk about a song that me and my wife Abby Ahmad were composing for a TV spot. And the concept was to go pretty early 80s here, which meant for me, I knew I wanted some Linn drums and I wanted some Juno synths, and I knew that I was going to want to treat guitars a certain way. I think it's good to think about this when you're going into production, so it's not really always a surprise. Although some surprises are good, you have a little bit of a trajectory, right? And so for the guitars, I knew I was going to want to use Fender Stratocasters and the chorus and flanging. Reverb was going to be important. And the overdrive sounds weren't going to be too heavy for this particular style of early 80s sound I was going for. The guitar tones were a little influenced by the Cars, so if you think of those late 70s, early 80s Cars songs. Let's listen to the song and then I'll break it down. Let's start with the drums. I was using some drum loops from the Joey Waronker Loop Loft collection. I did a little bit of cutting and stuff just to arrange the parts for what I was looking for. What I did is I doubled that with these Linn drums. I should show you the plugin quickly here. Okay, it's from V-Prom. Linn drums are such quintessential 80s drum machine sounds. You could hear them on so many songs. Love is a Battlefield and Pat Benatar. I think Take On Me from Aha is also Linn drums, and you can look it up. You find a lot of tracks that we revere from that era. We're using this drum machine. Here's both of them together. I'm going to add in the step sequencer. Actually, it's not. It's called an arpeggiator. These were big in the 80s. They were found on several keyboards, but the Roland Juno 106 had an arpeggiator, and I thought this was important for the track. along with that, I wanted to have an electric bass sit below, but I didn't want like a really tubby, big traditional sounding bass, so I played this. You can hear I'm using a pick for that. I used the SVT plugin, which I turned down the bass on. I cranked up the volume so it was getting a little gritty. Now I ran that into a compressor, and the big trick with the compressor was I set it so that there was just a little attack that would come through, and then it would clamp down pretty hard. So I actually had a lot of compression on it. It was almost more like an effect than what you would traditionally do for most normal bass sounds. I just really wanted to get that pick attack just to pop through so it would cut through the mix a little bit. The acoustic guitar part in this was recorded using a Martin HD35, which is a very warm and open sounding guitar. And I knew that I wanted this to be a little brighter. I was thinking a little bit more like the Cure kind of vibe. So I did a lot of EQing on the way in. I always used this Neve 1073 plugin. So I radically EQ'd the acoustic guitar so it didn't have a lot of low end. I also sent it to a bus that I had this AMS Neve reverb plugin, but I had it set to chorus. Chorus was really big in the 80s, so I used it pretty liberally in this song. We're going to start getting into these Cars and early 80s guitar sounds. I was playing power chords with a Stratocaster into this pedal here, which is the Klon KTR. I really like this for these type of clean yet like mildly compressed overdriven guitar sounds. It cuts off the low end a little bit, which I think is flattering for this type of music. Around this time they were using a lot of solid state amps like the Roland Jazz Chorus and things like that, so tube warmth and a lot of these things we associate with the 60s and 70s weren't necessarily appropriate for this era of recording. I had the Klon set fairly low. It's not really distorting that much, it's just kind of taking the frequency range and just squeezing in a little bit. I used the Softube Vintage Amp Room for the amp sim. When I open this up, there's a few adjustments I immediately make. One of them is I like to move this microphone a lot closer. It may not be right up against the grill, but I'll get it a lot closer than the stock setting. I turn the vibrato off. I don't know why they chose to have that on immediately all the time. And of course, I roll back the volume. We're not looking for tons of amp overdrive for this type of music. The bass is often a little too exaggerated for my taste, so I'll move that back a bit. I may or may not turn on the bright switch depending on what guitar I'm using. I was using a Stratocaster, so probably did not do that. I have that guitar being sent to the chorus a little bit as well. You're going to hear some hum in there, and if you haven't recorded a lot of single coil guitars before, you're going to be in for a little bit of a surprise, because single coil guitars, whether it be Stratocasters, Telecasters, guitars with P90 pickups, they pick up a lot of hum and noise, but it's natural. It's on all those old records, and I don't find it it's too much to get uptight about unless you have a problem with the power in your space that you're recording in, and it's exaggerated so much that you can actually hear it in the mix. Sometimes I use a flanger to emulate a little bit of that double tracking effect on guitars, which is almost similar to having a very, very short delay on, but there is a subtle difference between using the delay and a flanger to create those sounds.